What's good with YouTube? You already know Big Flacco with the convict's perspective, and I'm gonna smash, dash, and slide on through a little bit of energy. What's cracking? So we back at it. ACP's back on man, dropping content and whatnot, man. So please hit that like, subscribe, comment, do all those things to help support this channel. And hit the bell notification for future content. Okay, so as you guys already know, I got two other channels: the Convicts Reactions, where I do reactions, as well as Real Talk with Flacco. Convicts Reactions, I'm going to continue to do the reactions I've been doing. Real Talk with Flacco, I do not know. I posted some just basic videos to keep the monetization up, not to get money, not to get paid, because I'm not making no money off dropping those videos. But you're going to see future stuff on both those channels as well. I got to figure out what I'm going to do with Real Talk. You know, I have not decided yet, but I got to do something though. But in any event, you may see some uploads that you guys may have not caught, because a lot of you guys are not subscribed to Real Talk with Flacco or Convicts Reaction, and I dropped videos over there the last week just to keep the monetization up, as well as get some views, help give those channels a boost. But there's going to be some Dreamer interviews that you guys are going to be seeing. I'll be dropping throughout the day, a couple little diss tracks. As you know, I'm having fun with the diss tracks. But today we're going to talk about the Norteño format, also known as the Nuestra Raza format. Okay. Someone put in the comments, hey, Flacco, you did an episode on the bonds about a month ago. Once you get back to that, we're kind of interested in that. So I'm like, okay, let's get to it. That's one area of schooling when it comes to this stuff was one of my fortes. You know what I'm saying? And I have not only the experience, right, that's applying the bonds and the formats and different components of the 7 phases. I used to school a lot of individuals, or I used to always hold a lot of positions of authority wherever I was at. So now the format was very valuable, I thought, because at one point the bonds and all that information was privileged information. You had to take a step as a hermano or bro back then, and then a lot of times people would take that step based upon after they read the format. So up until then, the format would be the only thing that would be leaked to a Norteño at the time, which is what you'd call a northerner. See, there's different titles that you're going to hear out throughout the years, and I'm only talking about my experiences. So, whenever I used to school someone as a hermano, right, and I was recruiting them, I was sponsoring them, or I was undertaking their education, there was a couple things I would do at first. First, I would have them break down the word inferiority, right? I'd want to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what that word means and how it does not play a role in the day-to-day functions of the Norteño movement. Then I would give them the word superiority, because there was a lot of people who would obtain status and they didn't have the educational attainments to really apply things, and they got big-headed. There's a couple individuals that I stripped of their status based upon that. Because their educational attainments were not there, and they were not living up to the expectations of what a Norteño soldado was or what a hermano was. And see, from there after that, I'd give them the format. See, the first, indoctrinational stages is you want to teach a NR member is the history, then the bonds and formats, which is pretty much the first phase of a Norteño schooling. Then you also want to include weaponry. I used to do this when I used to pull someone. I would start them off with a format, give them the format, and I also teach them weaponry at the same time. Teach them how to make a diaphragm, how to make pegs, how to make fucking, paper filetos, how to do metal, all the different things that you're going to have to come into contact with to survive on the main line. And so the first part, I would do the format. And the reason why I do the format is because the format has one purpose. It's the introduction to what a NR, at that time, Nuestra Raza, soldados' responsibilities were, why he was making a commitment to, and what he was making a commitment. You know what I'm saying? For. And whereas the bonds were your due process, the bonds were your rights, the bonds served as a pillar to give you the foundation to make decisions in accordance to the law of the people. The format showed you what your responsibilities were as a soldado, and that's how they coincided and worked hand in hand. Now, I know the format, a lot of it by heart, but I'm still going to read it. Our future behind the walls, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I'm going to read some of it though, right? I think it'll make it easier for me, so you guys can get an understanding, right? Let's get to it though. Let me see. Bam. Our future behind the walls depends largely upon each and every one of us as Norteños. And what that's pretty much saying right there is that each one plays an intricate part in getting this movement moving forward, that no one individual is above or below the best interest of the movement. The will to leave old attitudes to the past and the will to adopt new and more meaningful and fulfilling ideas. And that means the way that we used to work in accordance to being street gang members, being drug addicts, being whatever it may be, that we got to raise our standards to be that more of what you see and have different ideas of how we can coexist out there in society. See, a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do back then is give our people a place where they can lay their head and become better men and rise above the stereotypes that they have of convicts in society. You know, that we are ones that can be looked at with respect. We are the ones that are entitled to look at socially equally. You know, these were the things that we strive for on a day-to-day basis. The determination to fight and challenge all those who oppose our unity and advancement towards equal justice. That means that anybody who becomes a stumbling block from the administrations, from the courts, from the oppositions, from those who turn a blind eye to the people's movement. This was how we educated people. We take a stand against anybody who is against what we are trying to achieve. You know, it was never about money. It was never about fucking power. It was always about having an equal share of the pie. Being able to have our fucking tables, being able to have a fucking line that we can go to and feel secure. And that's why as an soldado, you are the first line of defense for the people. That was the obligation you made. Yes, you had those that would hold leadership positions, but the subordinates under there would be the first that were supposed to be making sacrifices. And what ended up happening a lot of times is people would abuse their authority and they would have their circle of hermanos. And if you were a hermano who was a head case, they would send you on as a first mission. Okay? That each of us as Norteños recognize the true purpose of our struggle as a close-knit raza. And this is what I talked about earlier. We have to build relationships that are symbolic, that could even surpass those of bloodline relationships. Because when you have a close-knit raza that's together under unification, you are immune to anything that comes from external sources who are trying to fucking infiltrate your lines or trying to wreak havoc, as well as internally. And that statement kind of goes along with bond number 4, which is basically about the things that can become a detriment on end functions. And so that's pretty self-evident. Furthermore, let us be the alignment and inspiration of others behind the walls that stand victim to the prejudice and abuse of misused authority within the penal system. Now, they're not just talking about the system, which we all know is fucked and is out to oppress certain individuals, but it's those powers that be that don't want to see the Norteño movement succeed, which could be other groups, which could be degenerates, dropouts, you know, or those who try to abuse that they have more power in numbers. And see, that was our whole stance. The Nuestra Raza movement was never about fucking north or south, technically. It was about those who tried to oppress the Raza from fucking rising above the stature of what others tried to hold them in. You know, there was a time period where we never walked lines down south, except for Centinela one year, I think 95, 96. Other than that, you know, it was pretty rough at times, man. Up north, we'd have equal numbers, or maybe even, some places the Sudaners were still outnumbering the homeboys up north, believe it or not, back then. I've heard people question about fucking San Quentin didn't have about San Quentin in the main line. They didn't have no Sudaners in the main line when I was there in the 90s. You know what I mean? I know people that were there as far back as the early 90s. You know what I mean? There's people that commented on that. Now, didn't mean that there was not Sudaners in San Quentin at that time. They were either on death row, adjustment center, which is basically the whole, or they were in fucking the Bayside reception center. So it's no shot, it's no disrespect to any. There's a couple of dudes that took offense to it, but what I spoke is the truth. I'll be the first to admit there was about 10 or 12 prisons where the Northerners couldn't even walk the fucking lines. And there could be a prison to where, back then, where the Northerners could walk 1 yard out of maybe 4 or 5 yards on that prison. Those are the truth. You know? Advancement demands change. And that's a key statement. It means unless you want to become stagnated and continue to do the same thing over and over again, which is the definition of insanity, we have to open our ideals up to different things and be willing to change. We have to be willing. And that's a key part of this format, is that you're willing to do what's necessary for the best interest of yourself and the people. Because when you succeed, the people succeed. Okay. It is each Norteño's responsibility to promote unity amongst our kind as well as any other Raza in need of our guidance, assistance, or moral support. A true believer of our struggle is to be treated with dignity and respect on all levels. So basically, it's a responsibility to bring forth the people who have like-minded goals, and if we could be the backbone for their agendas or what they're going through, we need to sit there and show by example. Like there's the Nuestra Raza, Norteños, right? However you want to label it. They only had two allies, which would be the NF and Ordiners at that time. Everything else were different independent groups. Some proved to be worthy. BGF at times were worthy. Kumis were worthy at times. Crips were worthy. Damus. Sometimes it's based upon an individual level, and it could change from prison to prison. Sometimes people got along with Native Americans. Sometimes it could be a Bicep. It could be anybody who had like-minded ideas and respected us as a people. We were more than willing to help assist. And to see that part of it was this: we may not be able to pull them in to think of what the cause of movement is for us. And bear in mind, guys, I'm speaking about this as if I'm an active member, okay? But if we can't get them to side with us or campaign with us, at least we can neutralize them as far as being an enemy. And so the smallest thing as far as giving someone a care package or fucking helping them out with fucking some legal law questions or whatnot could pay dividends in the future for someone else when they go to another prison where the odds may be against the homeboys and different things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? Put this real quick. Okay, so this is the next part of it. Hold on, guys. Norteno format's a pretty good one, guys. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, so I'm gonna try to breeze through this a little bit faster though, guys. Let me see. This is pretty much a good one though, right here. And there was a second part to it, a true believer, which means someone who represents the true definition of what you see. One who's always willing to sacrifice. One who's there for his brother, man. One who shows unity. See, like I said before, unity is one thing, but being united is something different. Everybody that falls under the bandera of the NF and Norteño movement is basically united because they have represented that, you know what I'm saying, as a individual. It doesn't mean that there's unity within the people. You know what I'm saying? Unity comes through actions. Having activities, showing carnalismo, showing respect. That's what you do as a true believer. Not forgetting your fellow brother, not becoming selfish, not having individualist traits. Those are what would always be labeled as a true believer. And in my instance, from my past, my whole definition of a true believer was those that did not forget their brothers once they left. Because it would be easy for a brother to come up in there, get some status right, and next thing you know, they switch up. You know what I'm saying? I want to see the homeboy that gets out there and he goes and gets a good job, and even though he's not functioning with the regiment, he's still reaching back and helping his brothers. That to me was what you considered a true believer. Sometimes people think that a true believer is going to be the one to go whack someone. Not necessarily, because sometimes they're doing that for their own gain. A true believer is not going to do anything for their own personal gain. And that's the best way to define that in its simplified terms. Okay? Let me see. The true purpose and goals of a Norteño behind the walls, this is their purpose, is to establish a strong positive attitude for himself as well as for the Raza and any other minorities in need. It's by having those strong relationships, being an example for others to follow, having that right attitude, having it to where people gravitate towards you and you can move the crowd. Being an anarcho-dollar means you are a leader in some senses, or you're going to be called upon to have leaderships positions, and make sacrifices, and for you to have that positive attitude that you're doing this on behalf of the people, regardless of what adverse effects may come your way, And this is where it gets good though. It is apparent that within the Norteño struggle for better educational opportunities, social respect, and equality, there exist those who are the same heritage and background who for their own selfish reasons create obstacles and work alongside of other group segments that are contrary to the people's struggle. Basically, what this is saying is that there's those, it could be someone who defected, degenerates. It could be those that are still within your circle, who if they're against the collective, the group, its advancement, and is only seeking things for its own personal gain, whether they're active or inactive, and are set out to destroy and put create basically hindrances upon that push. These are what you call those that are thriving off the people's sweat and bloods, which we're gonna get into the second part. See, there's different layers to that, and I'm gonna do a video in the future. You know, there's a difference between a degenerate, a bandito, a dropout. You know what I'm saying, or someone who's just no good. There's different layers to this, and people need to realize that. Um, and as you come across numerous instances, you can pretty much identify what happened here. Was this a fucked up car? Was this due to a fucked up individual? And it's unfortunate that those sometimes who there's sometimes people get by, they can wiggle, they can get up in there, get good, establish things, and yet they have a whole false impersonation of who they are. You know what I'm saying? What you call an imposter. Sometimes their statuses ain't valid. Sometimes they're already dropouts. And so you've had people who were fucking working alongside administration who've held leadership positions back in the 80s and 90s. You know, Tito from Stockton was a key one. He basically was a bandito. He was driving off the sweat and blood. He was claiming to have been more of an authority person than what he was. He would try to fucking justify that he did this and did that. He was plugged in with this person, that person. Yeah, he didn't get recruited as a bro till 92, but he was making it seem like he had been one since 85. Okay, these degenerates are known as bandidos, who thrive upon their own people's hard work and sweat and blood. That's just self-evident. Anybody who capitalizes off the sacrifices of other people's work and hasn't done so themselves and doesn't live by the standards of what that movement's about is a fucking bandito, because they're thriving off everybody else's hard work and sweat. You know, that's one thing I can sit there and say, you know, when I was active, is that I fucking led by example. I made sacrifices. I put in a lot of work. I never fucking took advantage of the gente one time. And if there was incidences where one was, I'd be the first to fucking speak out. And that's why everybody used to fucking get mad. You know, they didn't get mad. In the back of the head, they got mad. Because a lot of times fucking I would present a case that you couldn't fucking touch. You know, I experienced that when I was in DVI. And when I bumped heads with a couple dudes there, fucking Chuco from Stockton, fucking Travieso from Modesto, and not Shadow, a couple of these other cats. But little did they know I had fucking Hoodlum from fucking Soccer out there. I had the homeboy fucking Top from Vallejo. All dudes that knew me. So when I presented my case, I shut them down. I presented the law against them. You're not going to sit there and fucking tell me that I don't live up to the standards of what's expected because you guys haven't been around me. And this individual you guys are favoritizing, this dude right here is a piece of shit. He's fucking no good. And I guarantee you any fucking carnal is going to fucking acknowledge that. Sure enough, I was right on everything. They backed off it. They backed off it within the first 2 kites I sent and realized I wasn't playing. And then I started to have a relationship with those brothers. But there's those that are going to sit there and try to test you to see if you are worthy. If you are what you say you are. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to read the whole thing right now. Those who seek to destroy and undermine our Raza's efforts to rise above their standards of living through their own actions made it possible for us and other groups like us to come together henceforth, present a strong united front. I'm plugged up, guys. So my reading is pretty bad. It is urgent that a Norteño understands his duties and responsibilities and at the same time asserts and anticipates the many sacrifices we will all come to endure at one time or another. I just mentioned all this. Many of us will make it to the streets, and some will eventually return, while others will not make it out for a very long, long time, and others will never make it beyond these walls. However, while we are inside, we must establish a strong foothold in the Pinta for all those who remain and those who shall return, which is everything I said. We just want a place to where our gente can come and have an establishment. Our foremost and ultimate goal is to eventually establish a strong front in all Pintas where one is able to do his time and enjoy all the advantages and privileges that makes existence behind the walls a more bearable one. Everything I've been highlighting over the last since I've had this channel, that's all that's ever wanted. The goals of the Norteño movement were nothing that wasn't asking for too much, while at the same time expanding one's areas of need such as education, vacation, and other necessities essential to our future accomplishments. This is what I talked about earlier. Going to prison and becoming a better person than what you were when you came in, and being able to take advantage of those resources. You can't always do so when you have to worry about the opposition, when you have those that are standing against you. And this is what the ultimate goal is, and it's a daily struggle. The daily struggle of the people is this. When you hear about the homeboys use the word struggle. This is what the struggle is: to secure, educate, and establish on a daily basis for the betterment of the people. Because every day there's going to be obstacles that present themselves to fucking stop that. That's what the struggle is. You can sit there and try to expound it into different fucking ways of explaining it, but that right there, in the most simplified terms, is how I used to educate people. Once firmly established in the Pinta, our struggles will gradually expand into the streets. The struggle on the streets will, of course, be on a much greater scale and will basically follow the same concept of La Nuestra Raza. That right there is how the Nuestra Raza title came about. That statement right there. To fully succeed in our cause, investment, if hard work and time will be much. There will be stumbling blocks in our midst our paths, but through this we shall allow our setbacks to serve as experience. This experience will be the spirit that puts a fire in our hearts, which is something that you used to always hear about that. He's striving, he has that fire. And this experience will be the spirit that puts a fire in our hearts and minds for our future accomplishments and victories. To fully accomplish our set goals and objectives, all Norteños must function on the same level of awareness and discipline. This involves following the 14 bonds of the Nuestra Raza rules and regulations adopted for all Norteños, as all fronts must function on the same level. So that's the introduction, guys. And it's basically teaching what your responsibilities are, and it's an introduction into the Norteño movement. This is what you're committing yourself to. This is what it's all about. It's basically a very defined breakdown of the cause, the struggle, you know, in a more how you say it, in a more way of indoctrinating each soldado. So basically what you used to do is have either one or two sentences and you'd be filtered out to an individual. They'd have to write an essay on it. When I would recruit someone as a pro, I've recruited quite a few people. I've sponsored quite a few people. Not too many, because you put your name behind it and you want to make sure their scoring is. I said probably recruited maybe about, let me see, 1, 2, 3, maybe as many as 8 or 9 people I've recruited. You know, some of them are actually carnadas now too as well. You know, this is how I started them. I would start them on the format, and then I'd go into the bonds, and I'd go through all the other phases, which we're going to discuss those phases and some of the breakdowns as far as like how to establish a main line, how to do this and how to do that. But now that you got a base understanding, a month ago I did the bonds. Now I'm doing the format. Now you got a breakdown of what ANR Soldado was, what his laws were, what his due process was, what's his obligations, and what his responsibility is. That's what you're committing to. See, the only difference between a hermano, a bro, and a Norteño back in the days was one was obligated, one was not. One was obligated to uphold these laws, those responsibilities. The other one was responsible to those laws. And see, that's where people got a misconception of things. Anyways, this is the format. I'm gonna go into maybe in a couple of weeks I'll go into weaponry and warfare tactics and the mainline training and so forth. I'm gonna go over the different phases, man. But stay tuned for more content. It's your boy Flacco. I'm out.